Well, everybody, welcome back. It is Monday, December 7th. It is Pearl Harbor
Thir-
Day. I might have a
Oh,
little
yeah,
sigh.
sorry. I thought it was the third. No, no, no.
No, well, today is
I'm
the
all off kilter
third.
here.
Well, okay, so today is actually the third. It's Thursday. We are recording this for Monday and Wednesday of next week, folks. As you can tell, Mr. Wongard is back. I gave you a heads up that we were going to finish the lecture on the Korean War, and really just try to focus in as we all get used to, the DL kids, you're getting used to a little bit new format. The hybrid kids, you're getting used to being DL this time with a little bit different expectations, but it's been great to see everybody. I love my DL advisory. But hybrid kids, it's been great to see your faces and get to talk with
I
you
missed you guys already.
and get to know y'all. So we're picking up where we left off. I know it's been a couple weeks since we talked about Korea, but we brought one of the experts back, Mr. Wongard, to help us pick up where we left off as the Korean War is trying to spin up. From what I remember, Mr. Wongard, and you can correct me, MacArthur is about to have his kind of capstone crowning military achievement in Korea, but I get the feeling you're going to tell me that things don't necessarily go the way he anticipated they would.
Let's just say that the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And the fall of MacArthur today is it's epic. It's one for the record books. That is to be sure. But Mr. Krieger, if you're okay with it, I'm going to do a lightning round's worth of review, just because it has been a couple weeks since we hit on this. So, as you can remember, before we have the North and South Korea that we've now got, it was Korea. It was just Korea. Japan took it over in 1911 and squeezed it for its resources and brutalized its people. And then after World War II was done, the Soviet Union and the United States divided it in half at the 38th parallel and said that Japanese troops had to surrender the Soviet Union in the north and the United States in the south. And eventually there was going to be an election that would bring them together either completely under communism or capitalism. Syngman Rhee in the south and Kim Il-sung in the north. And the election never happened because both sides did not want to cede ground to each other. And so eventually North Korea, with the backing of China and the Soviet Union, invades South Korea, takes South Korea by surprise. South Korea cries to the United Nations. The United Nations manages to send its UN forces to South Korea to defend it, because at that moment, the Soviet Union was boycotting the UN because the United Nations was recognizing Chiang Kai-shek in Taiwan as the ruler of all of China instead of the communist mainland leader, Mao Zedong. And as a result, the UN comes in. They manage to blunt the North Korean advance around the port city of Busan. They pour a whole bunch of soldiers in there. You have MacArthur that does an amphibious landing up at the South Korean city of Incheon. He starts moving to the south. Troops move out of the Busan perimeter. They meet each other, capture all the North Korean soldiers to the south, and then throw away all. And the North Korean army literally picks up and runs back above the 38th parallel. And that's about as good of a really quick review that I can do. And so all of a sudden, the UN moves up to the 38th parallel, and MacArthur goes, "Can I go get these guys?" And Truman's like, "I'm not sure this is a good idea." MacArthur's like, "You sent me here to do a job. So can I go do my dang job now?" And Truman, even though he does not like this idea, says, "All right, fine." And as the United Nations forces continue to push more and more into North Korea, they eventually take Pyongyang, North Korea's capital. As they get up very close to the Yalu River, which is the natural boundary between China and North Korea, China has been saying every mile that the United Nations army comes north, and they go, "You better stop that. Just knock it off." And the UN army just continues moving, and China gets nervous. And that was in fact, a couple of you 8th graders actually sent me messages going, "Did you have to do that cliffhanger?" And the answer is yes, because of course I did.
Of course.
Of course
like,
I did.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, because now the conclusion. Now, here's the thing. Take a look at that. I realize it's a grainy picture, but that is a whole mess of Chinese soldiers. They are well trained. They are well armed. They are well prepared. And most importantly, super experienced soldiers. Now, even before the UN got close to the Yalu River, Mao Zedong was already nervous that MacArthur might get to the Yalu River and go, let's just go into China. We're already here. And so he stacked up some of his best soldiers, over 300,000 of them, up on the Yalu River. And he repeatedly tells MacArthur, don't come any farther. And MacArthur's like, you ain't going to do nothing. So no, we're not going to stop because you tell us to stop. So eventually, Mao Zedong goes, all right, I gave you numerous warnings about this, and apparently you don't want to listen to me. So this army comes across and immediately, like a just a tidal wave, slams into the UN forces. And the UN forces got completely overwhelmed for two reasons. First off, this was an attack by surprise, basically along the entire front. I mean, 300,000 soldiers, you hit the UN army everywhere, and the UN forces are sent into a full retreat. Everybody turns around and runs. The Chinese, one of the things that they do, which, by modern warfare tactics of today, you normally don't do this, they simply have so many soldiers that they completely overwhelm the UN defenders, and they start sending them packing. And so by January of 1951, the UN forces and the U.S. forces that are part of the UN are now back below the 38th parallel. They're back below the 38th parallel, so they've been completely pushed out of North Korea at this point. But at that point, then MacArthur gets some reinforcements from the UN, and North Korea is now kind of standing there going, North Korea and China, North Korea's kind of looking big brother China going, what do you think about that? We've got backup too. And MacArthur goes, this isn't going to stand. Bam! Now they start slamming into each other. And for the next 2 years, I know that it says they're World War I style back and forth fighting. And you all know from when you learned about World War I with me last year, it's not going to be like that. It's not specifically going to be like that. Basically what goes on is the UN gains some ground, then loses a little bit. North Korea gains some ground and then loses it a little bit. So it goes back and forth over a very, very narrow strip of land that is basically becoming the new border between North and South Korea. But like Mr. Krieger said, MacArthur just before the Chinese start pushing back, MacArthur, the whole world's like, dude, this guy's incredible. This guy just keeps being more and more and more successful. And then all of a sudden, it all comes crashing down because MacArthur had been getting warnings from China and his own army that I think the Chinese are going to come at us if we move any closer. And he just kept saying, no, they won't. No, they won't. No, they won't. And then he was proven wrong. And all of a sudden, everybody begins calling into question MacArthur's leadership and MacArthur's mentality. And MacArthur does not like that. MacArthur's like, no, I don't lose. I don't lose. And it's at this point that MacArthur began thinking outside the box so much that he completely left the box and it became a dot on the horizon. So, Mr. Krieger, you want to add anything so far?
I'm just thinking back to MacArthur's role in World War II and how there's a little bit of, I won't say MacArthur was necessarily the kid brother, but I mean, Patton got a ton of credit in World War II, and Ike, ton of credit. At this point, Eisenhower goes from Supreme Allied Commander to the president in 6 years or 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
And yes, MacArthur is the guy who supervises the end of the war in the Pacific and gives the MacArthur speech on, I forget the name of the ship when the Japanese surrender is
Missouri.
Yeah, on the Missouri. It's a super powerful speech, incredible moment. But I can't help but wonder if there wasn't a little bit of legacy chasing for MacArthur that blinded his vision to be pragmatic, because he had made his bones in the Pacific for being pragmatic, for being a problem solver and really seeing the whole picture. But like you just said, he's, for whatever reason, so caught up in legacy building and his name that he loses sight of what he things that you would expect a commander like him not to lose sight of.
Absolutely. I mean, his ego is literally the reason for his
That's it.
downfall. That's a really, really, really good way to put it. Because you talk about the idea of chasing legacy, and he was pragmatic during World War II. He was able to problem solve, and he thought he could take that same idea and apply it here. But it was by thinking outside the box that he came up with an idea that is utterly horrible. Now, that right there is a nuclear weapon. Now, here's the thing. That's the mushroom cloud from a nuclear weapon that exploded 3 or 4 seconds before. MacArthur, after getting pushed back below the 38th parallel, he turns to the UN, he turns to Truman, and he says, we got to hit him back. We got to hit him back. And Truman's like, I get it. I get it. No, and MacArthur goes, no, you don't get it. You sent me here to win. So let me win. You know what? And I swear, I'm not making this up. He turned to Truman and goes, give me 50. Give me 50 atomic bombs. 50. And we'll never have to worry about North Korea or China ever again. Now, Truman hears this and goes, are you insane? And he goes, no. You sent me here to win this war. That guarantees we win this war. And Truman goes, that's not winning a war, that's genocide. And MacArthur goes, hey, sometimes you got to put the hammer to the nail. In this case, we're putting an anvil to the nail. But if you want results, my plan will give results. Truman sits back on this and just goes, he looks at his advisors and he's like, no, right? And all the advisors are like, yeah, absolutely not. No, absolutely not. And it's at this point, because this is the one thing about Truman that I always liked, is that Truman was a very logical guy. He was a super, super logical guy. He kind of reminds me of Woodrow Wilson a little bit. That
from that academic mold.
Exactly right. And so Truman goes, no. Mac goes, and notice I'm saying Mac, that's MacArthur. MacArthur goes, why not? And he goes, do you think that China doesn't have backup? You know, China and the Soviet Union don't get along with each other. That's what the SU stands for. China and the Soviet Union don't get along, but if you carpet bomb China and North Korea with atomic weapons, that's going to upset the Soviet Union, and we may have World War III on our hands. Okay? Do you want World War III? Think about the weapons we have now. It's not just going to be military forces that are killed, because basically what MacArthur is asking for is permission to kill like 300 million people. That's basically what he's asked to do. He's asked, it's like, I'll take out all the big Chinese cities. I will take out all of North Korea, and then it can be ours. So basically he says, hey, can I irradiate a big portion? Can I irradiate all of North Korea and big portions of China so we don't have to worry about communism anymore, but I'm going to turn them into what looks like the land of the walking dead, and it'll be irradiated for a really long time. Truman's like, this is stupid. No. If you do that, if I let you do that, World War III is gonna start. And MacArthur's like, I don't think it will. I don't think the Soviet Union would actually go to war over something that didn't involve them. And this is when Truman says something, I just love it. I love how blunt he is with MacArthur right here. He says, look, because first off, I know you're all thinking, is it worth it? No, it's definitely not worth it. But I love how this is worded. He goes, Mac, it's the wrong war, in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong enemy. Nothing good comes out of this, okay? I understand you're angry you lost. I understand that your ego's taking a hit, but we're not going to kill hundreds of millions of innocent people to make you feel better, okay? We're just not. We're just not going to do that. Now, here's the thing. Any logical person at that point would probably sit back going, okay, that's fair. I guess that's a fair point. But MacArthur, being that the dude is an utter and complete diva and egomaniac, decides, he goes, all right, fine. You don't like my plan? I'll go find some people who do, and we're going to get you out of power so then I can do what I want. Now Truman goes, really? Mac's like, watch me. Truman goes, go ahead. Mac's like, okay. So what happens next is kind of a doozy. That right there. Yep. That's a bit of a giveaway here. By April of 1951, MacArthur and the UN forces have pushed back to where this war started, back to the 38th parallel, roughly. So the war started in 1950. It went south, it went north, it went south, and it's come back to the middle. We've had over 1 million people killed and wounded, and now we are back where we've started because war. Now what? Now MacArthur honestly thinks to himself, look, it's a no-brainer. Let's use these nuclear weapons. Let's just wipe out North Korea and China, and it'll be fine. South Korea, you cool with this? And South Korea's like, well, you're defending us, so I guess we kind of have to be okay with this. And then he turns and looks at the Soviet Union like, I bet you don't do anything either. And here's where it got nasty. Now, notice it says speaks to U.S. newspapers, and MacArthur tries to get the American public on his side. But I'm going to tell you this right now. If any of you are thinking, he went out and said he wants to kill hundreds of millions of people, no, he said he had a plan. But that's where he left it. There are no details to this plan. He's using his cred with the people of the United States and the world, for that matter. He goes, look, I got a plan to finally end this war. And President Truman isn't going to let me do it. So he's kind of pouting, and he's trying to tattle. Or at least he thinks it's tattling. Now, here's the funny thing about it. What should Truman do? I'm willing to bet a whole bunch. It's like, just can him already. Just get rid of him. If he's going to act like a petulant 8-year-old, then just get him out. Get him out. And that's eventually what Truman does. On the 11th of April, Truman has gone to American newspapers going, I have a plan and president won't let me do my plan. And the American people put pressure on Truman. They're going, let him do what he's doing. If he has a plan, let him execute it. And Truman comes out and says, my fellow Americans, on the 11th of April, 1951, he goes, look, I appreciate the service of General MacArthur, but he is being relieved of his duties as the commander of the forces in South Korea. And he is replaced by a man named Matthew Ridgway once it's all said and done. Now, normally in class, I ask this, was this the right thing to do? And I think I've yet to have a student go, no, that was the wrong decision to make. But I'm going to tell you something right now, and Mr. Krieger can back me up on this. Truman caught all sorts of crap for this. Mm-hmm. Because here's the thing. Truman knows the whole story. MacArthur has his version of the story, and then he's telling his story to the American newspapers, American media, and so the United States doesn't have the full story. And as a result, most people look at MacArthur and they look at him with reverence and awe. And so the idea that Truman would fire this guy, everybody thinks that Truman is insane, not MacArthur. But that's also because MacArthur hasn't revealed his plan. Check that out. That's him. In Congress. After he got canned, he's told you have to come back home. And he comes back home and he says, I want to make a speech in front of Congress. And he turns to Truman and go, you going to stop me? And Truman goes, no, go ahead. Even Truman's advisor's like, what are you doing? Truman goes, I know what I'm doing. MacArthur goes, okay. And he gets up in Congress. I mean, just look at that picture. He pounds the what's that thing called? Podium?
Pulpit?
Yeah, pulpit. Yeah, he pounds
podium
the pulpit.
Or pulpit, either one.
Yeah, and so he goes out and he just starts ripping Truman apart. Just ripping him apart. He goes there and he talks about the idea that nobody appreciates me. Old soldiers never die. They just fade away. And so he goes up there and he says, I had a plan and I didn't get to execute my plan. It's a woe is me speech, to be sure. He's up there and he's playing the victim. I'm not going to lie, he's doing a bang-up job. He really, really is. And the whole time, American popular support starts swaying towards MacArthur and away from Truman. There are members of the Republican Party that go up and they go, you know what, Mac? You want to be president? And Mac's like, absolutely. I'd be happy to be president. So now there's talk about him being nominated for president against Truman in the next election. The whole time this is going on, you got Truman that's just kind of sitting back there like this, just watching everything Mac is doing.